Okay, that's difficult.
Oh, I recognize some names.
Good. So, hi everybody. So we're lucky to have, this is our, hopefully, let me just turn a few people on mute in case you start shouting or going crazy. No, we seem to be all on mute, I think. If you're not on mute, anybody, could you turn yourself on mute? It will save me clicking for everyone. Because last time we had someone shouting in the background about something, I don't know, they hadn't fed the kids. So turn yourself on mute, apart from my speakers. Someone's speaking. I know that voice. Recording in progress. Sorry, I'm just trying to turn people on mute. I could hear someone talking. All right, I know. Jackie's fine. Anyone who's not on mute, please put yourself on mute, apart from the speakers.
Are you talking about us or?
No, you're fine, Audrey. It's just
okay.
it's the other people. I could hear someone talking on the phone in the background. We don't want to have all of that. Okay, so hi everyone. It's the 7th Fida Talks. We've come up with a title today, which was Industrialism. Last time we spoke about commercialism. Sounds very Virgil with these sort of hyper words. And we're luckily joined by these. So I'm going to open up. I've done a little PDF presentation so I can share my screen with you. Let me just get to my screen. Still got people coming in. Okay, so industrialism, we've got a lovely picture there by Barbara. Someone's obviously left their speaker on. So going industrial in the arts, finding your place in the fashion field. So one of the things we've spoken about quite heavily between us, and I've spoken to a few of these people before, is finding your space within the commercial market, in the industrial market, and looking for new spaces and new opportunities for jobs. And I guess one of them was, which Audrey and many of us have been doing, is working alongside a fashion designer and being their sort of right-hand man. I remember a famous critic who myself and Massimo knew. She was saying it was known as the éminence grise, which meant this sort of shadow in the sides. And they explain that everyone from Raf Simons and all these designers have this little right-hand man or right-hand lady who works alongside these designers and is their sort of vision or helps with their vision to sort of get it across to the market. So we've got myself, Massimo, Casagrande, Barbara Hulanicki, Typoe, Audrey Schilt, and Jackie Mallon. And you may have seen some of these names popping up in our Instagram feed or in discussions. Plus we have this show in Miami. So we've brought in a few people from Miami. We're lucky. So they've jumped in out of the sun to spend a bit of time with us. And also with regards to Typoe, with exhibitions and what's happening on the Miami scene as well. So it's a good sort of debate tonight. If you have any questions, stick them in the chat. We're going to try and come across a few ideas and a few sort of topics regarding pay and how to find opportunities working with designers and what each of these people have done to sort of get involved in the market and create their opportunity. So
better go on that table there. Is there a small easel or something?
No, that's fine there. Just leave it there.
It would have been good if we had a little small easel.
No, Joe put it there. She just
if you could mute yourself, people, please. So we've got Barbara here. Barbara was the owner of Bieber and started Bieber, and you've got a little bit of information on her. We're not going to talk too much about the designers because you can go in and have a good look at them. It's more of a roundtable debate tonight to talk about getting a job, finding an opportunity, working alongside these amazing designers. And, you know, Barbara's the sort of person who would be looking for illustrators and artists to help capture her vision. And that's quite important. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to decode or get some information of the sort of things she'd be looking at. And, you know, this is a drawing by Barbara as well. So she's actually a very competent illustrator. So usually
5 years of it.
a lot of illustrators or designers would probably do a lot of their work themselves, but today it tends to be a lot more stylists. So there's more opportunities, I think, for illustrators in the market. We've got Massimo. Massimo's the Dean of Fashion at Marangoni. He curated the recent Fida exhibition. This is a bit of something Massimo did many years ago and has kind of strived on to do this sort of playing with textures and materials, looking at the white shirt, deconstructing it, rebuilding it, looking at new narratives for design. So I guess have a look at Massimo's work. Massimo does a series of podcasts as well. So there's lots of sort of areas of sharing knowledge, information, transfer, and education.
No, it's fine.
Now I want to do that. And you're a vacation.
Yeah.
So someone's having a good
No, sir.
Maybe just mute us all, and then when we speak, we can unmute ourselves.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
It's someone called iPad that's talking.
I don't know if I know how to unmute myself.
Yeah, sorry everybody, but someone loves chatting. I think they've muted now. Well done, Matt.
Over there. Right over to the top. Right over to them. Right over. 2 yards away. Up 2 yards away. Okay.
Someone's having a good chat.
She's buying 2 yards of something.
Hopefully they'll stop talking. So next we've got Jackie Mallon. Jackie Mallon, she's been great for, I guess, seeing the journey of Fida. Funnily enough, Massimo knew Jackie in Milan. Jackie's had a journey through the fashion industry, has become more of a critic, I would say, with her knowledge as an author, as a writer, as a journalist, internationally writing for Fashion United, and has covered a few stories for us, which is fantastic, helping to get our voice out there, which, you know, is a tough enough task, but, you know, it's great that she's sort of jumped on board. I think she loves what we do. We'll find out more in a little while, but I'm pretty sure she does. So thanks a lot as well, Jackie, for tonight. Typoe, Massimo brought me to the attention of Typoe, a sort of image maker, creative, multidisciplinary, which is great to see a multidisciplinary artist, this sort of polymath, very relevant in the sort of fashion, well, in the creative industry. So it's great to have a person who's going to have a sort of wide range of understanding of becoming more industrious and becoming more commercial, showing work in commercial galleries. What do you do? How do you work? How do you function? How do you survive? So these are all important questions with regards to being a fashion creative, fashion artist, fashion illustrator today. So hopefully we'll come across a few debates and topics. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I don't think I've missed anybody. Oh no, Audrey. Have I missed Audrey? Yes. So Audrey still. I spoke to Audrey right at the beginning of our, I guess, our quest. And she's worked alongside Ralph Lauren. So it's a perfect person to have tonight. And, you know, we're so lucky to have Audrey and Barbara and all the team. But, you know, Audrey's worked from the beginning, worked with some super famous designers, managed to dress some super famous people as well. So hopefully we might be able to get into a little bit of that information, but I'm sure, you know, let's see what data or little things, secrets that we can get out of her tonight. So it's great to have you as well. Thank you, Audrey. So I'm just going to stop sharing so we can all see each other. and then hopefully I might find this chatterbox. iPad, thank God. I could, and whoever it was. So let me get back to my other people. Okay, so I guess the first things I would like to talk about is, how do you become a fashion illustrator alongside a designer? And I'll start with Audrey first. If you could have any thoughts on that, Audrey.
Well, my journey was unusual. I started with Halston. I got out of school and I didn't have a job because I was too inexperienced for the high-end market and not inexperienced. And then for the low-end market, my illustrations were too sophisticated. So it was quite a good 6 to 8 months of walking the streets. And at that time you could walk the streets as opposed to the internet, which I think was humanly better because you were able to connect with people more easily on a human level. I find that technology has sort of, I know it brings us together, but I also feel it separates us. You know, you lose that energy between two people. But getting back to your question, so I started with Halston. There were 85 hats on a freelance basis at $1 a hat. I mean, you can't get much lower than that. So, but I finished the 85 hats and I was ready to say goodbye, thinking, oh God, I have to go back to the streets again. And he offered me a full-time job, asked me how much I want a week, and $85 at that time was a lot of money to me. So he paid me $85 a week, and I started out sketching his hats. And the experience in sketching his hats was he taught me a lot about line. Like I used to scratch a lot. I'm a lefty, scratch a lot. And he taught me to simplify my lines, say it once. So I started to listen to a designer's point of view. He was a minimalist, even in his hats. And he started to give me entree into the design world, which I had very little knowledge of because it was a minor in the field of illustration, which I think it should be more intensified now, because I think working with a designer is really important to know design. I mean, I actually went back to school and took pattern making and draping when I was working for Ralph Lauren, because the fronts of my sketch didn't match the backs of the back views. And I really didn't understand how to make the garment. So going back to school and learning that area was paramount in getting my illustrations to a higher level. I mean, my illustrations changed completely as far as, you know, illustrating the designs that weren't even there, which was in many cases. So working with Halston and Ralph Lauren gave me an education in design. And it really saved my illustrating, because I think it just skyrocketed me to another level. So I think even if you go into a designer and you don't make as much money as you want to make, there's an education to be found. So I'm not saying to stay there, because as I grew within the company, I became important to the designer. I mean, I was learning and I was connecting on a creative energy. We connected. I could finish that person's sentence by the time I was finished. So it gave me a home, really. I actually established a position for myself at Ralph Lauren for 22 years. And in that 22 years, I was able to ask for raises, ask for promotions as I became important to the brand and my contribution to the brand. So it's really, you're making your own way. I don't know how it is now, but I made my own way by educating myself and really loving my craft and being there for that. And then when the time came to be rewarded, I was rewarded. And it may have been several years that it took me to get rewarded, and I had to speak up for myself. It wasn't that they just gave it to me. They don't just give it to you. You have to know when you're important to them, and you'll know by the work that you put out, by how they use you. So for that reason, I say if you can get in with a designer and start to become important to that designer and really listen and understand his point of view without using your ego and wanting to become a designer, staying in your position as an illustrator, but then adding unknowingly as a designer, because that's what happens. You sort of like Halston would give me, after he saw me sketching hats, he put me off on my own and said, okay, here's 3 pom-poms, make a hat out of it. And I was kind of like, whoa, okay. But I did it. And he actually loved the hat and he made the hat. So, he was a very generous designer. You also have to find the right designer. Not everybody's going to be as generous as that. But you have to have a relationship with that designer where they trust you, that you're not there for yourself, that you're there to really support their vision. And then eventually, as you get that trust, they start to be more generous with you. I mean, that's at least what I experienced.
So we dance around a bit. I just would be curious to know from Barbara's point of view, because Barbara, I guess, worked as an illustrator and as a designer. So I guess question for you, Barbara, is a similar, were you able to ask other illustrators to create your vision as well as yourself? Because I know you draw as well, Barbara.
No, I mean, I'll tell you exactly, when I came out of school, I had 2 years at a Brighton Art School. And I think that's so important to learn how to draw. And then after that, because my family home was such a nightmare, I got a job with in an illustration studio that did nothing but illustrations. This is way back from all of you, I think. And worked my way up from making tea, and which is an art form, and of actually going to all the fashion shows and working for newspapers and magazines. Like at the time, there was no photography that went to the fashion shows, for instance, that they sent illustrators to go in there to illustrate the stuff. And I was by then going into Paris and not so much Italy, but mostly Paris, to all the big guys, and the stuff was so boring, you've no idea. It was all for kind of ladies who lunch. And it was usually the fashion show would be full of buyers from department stores in America who would buy their seat, the front row seat, and they would get, say the seat cost them $2,000, which was a lot of money then, and then they would get one pattern, so that they were the sort of business side of all the really big designers. Dior, and I've been to so many Dior shows that were so boring, you've no idea. One pattern, one black pattern of one dress with 2 buttons, 3 buttons, 4. But when I went to art school, fashion designing was really out. It was really lowly. It was almost, I can't tell you. They used to say there were 2 of us, oh, you're one of those, go over there to that. I mean, it was really quite kind of degrading. And then until I was doing desperate, I'm starting to make some money and I have no clothes to wear. And I'm 18, 19, and you're going to all these fashion shows. And that's what, when I met my husband who was in advertising, he said, you've got to get back into designing because fashion illustration is just it's not there anymore because the photography is starting to come in. And then, I mean, I always do my own illustrations and I've never I don't get on with the computer very well, so I have to bring somebody else into. But I think it's this drawing, actually going to art school and drawing that's so important. Because it's a way of communicating with people. It's incredible. And what am I going to talk about?
No. I guess like everybody here who I've invited all draws, and we're seeing way too many people, I guess, running the ships who can't.
I mean, we were just before we started, we were looking at these old Vogue magazines from the 70s, and we were just commenting on how interesting it is that most of the advertisements inside were all like hand drawn.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
All of these, which is absolutely amazing. You know, like you've got brands like Armani. I mean, we even found the Old Marangoni logo from 1976. You know, it's like Barbara was saying, with the rise of photography, the illustrator sort of disappears.
But I mean, those illustrations would have been commissioned by advertising agencies, really big in England, you know.
And then you used to have the department stores that used to illustrate. I illustrated the Bergdorf Goodman BG ads for about 8 years. So you did have, and Bloomingdale's, and I mean, I had every department store I was illustrating.
You're a little later on though. You're a little later. I'm right in the cave with
I don't think I'm that much later.
No, I don't think.
I mean, I'm talking about the 60s, the early mid 60s. Yeah. And they, Oh, so you didn't have that. Okay.
No, because I stopped in 1964 when we started Biba. And we got 19.
By the way, I went to Biba when I was, my first trip to London, I went to Biba. And I went to Biba and I bought my entire wardrobe at Biba. I love Biba.
For nothing, no. No, but it was really, I mean, that the need was so much for the clothes for young people who had jobs. Everybody had a job. And typing books. That was the big thing of learning how to type. And they weren't huge jobs, and but they were dressing. They were, they wanted clothes. While this old lady is in this, I must say, the person that absolutely, I was just saying, having to sit through 4 years of looking at these old lady designs, and suddenly Audrey Hepburn comes into the picture, and she changed everything. It was absolutely amazing. She was such a breath of fresh air, and she suddenly she put a young vision on these very boring clothes and fashion houses in Paris. And they had an embargo of 30 days where because of all the daily papers were coming and wanting to do stories, that they weren't allowed to use the visuals at all of the styles. Can you imagine 30 days? It was really very archaic, the whole thing, until Audrey came along and suddenly you've got a market. God, you spend all your days looking for these little earrings that she was wearing, and there's nobody's doing them, and it's such despair. You've no idea.
So it shows you now in the current market how the influential people are still so influential on trends, on looks. And I know, Audrey, you've illustrated many people and designed as well, for various celebs, Kanye West as well. And
yeah, I branched out.
you branched out. And I know and Massimo, to come to you as well, because you worked at Versace and doing sort of the vision there in Milan, and kind of having a sort of a newer, and Jackie. So I guess bringing Massimo and Jackie into the discussion, I guess, Massimo, your experience of creating the vision of a designer, how was your experience?
I think Jackie will relate to it. I mean, we were both in Milan at the same time. She was at Armani up the road, and I was at Versace down the other end. I think when you work, my experience was when we were working for Versace, we had a sort of a vision. It was a particular type of woman. So we had a particular style in having to do the illustrations. It had to, you know, when we did the croquis of the body with the hair and everything, it had to reflect what the brand was about. So you had to learn to interpret the brand. And it was absolutely amazing because we had access to the archive. So we got to see Gianni's original drawings, you know, of how he did things. And we all try to sort of learn to copy his style, because that's something that we wanted to continue to maintain the image. But obviously at the same time, we had to understand that Donatella was now the designer. So we needed to kind of transition this legacy from him, reflecting sort of her. Obviously the woman became a bit more sexier. The fabric became smaller and smaller. So, but I think it was really interesting. For me, the best part was looking at the archives and seeing how he did all the renderings and being able to update and maybe try to replicate some of that stuff. It was different to maybe some of the illustrations I would do by myself for my own pleasure, because you're working for a brand that has this identity. So you need to start sort of illustrating, reflecting what they are like, you know?
Yeah.
But I have to say, it's stuck in, you know, after 4 years, 5 years that I was there, I can't remember. It kind of like, I do sometimes when I sketch, I do have like this sort of influence that hasn't left me. It's still there, you know.
And for you, Jackie, how was it at Armani?
Interesting.
So I think that the thing that connects all the experiences is the fact that it is a tool of communication, and but it is a tool of communication that has to be tailored everywhere you go. You can't bring your full, at least I speak from the point of view of as a designer of 15 years, you can't bring your full self because that is not, it's not the space for it. So so you have to tailor it. And I have, my journey through illustration has been circuitous because sometimes it has really gained me favor and sometimes it has completely got me struck off the Christmas card list. And one, I think I learned very early in my career the importance of illustration. And unlike Barbara, at the time that I was graduating from Central St. Martin's, illustration had fallen by the wayside, and design. It was a time just after McQueen and Galliano, so everybody wanted to be a superstar designer. I didn't want to be a superstar designer, and there was no hope of that because I crawled out of my final year of my master's at Central St. Martin's, and my instructor there had told me, this is the world famous instructor, tutor, had told me, you can't draw. And I knew that I could draw because I'd been drawing since I was a wee thing, but I couldn't draw in a way that communicated with her. And so what she said to me hurt at the time. It was a very vulnerable time. And so I figured out a method of communicating that she liked, which was a series of pencil drawings with collage on top. These pleased her. I was just wanted to graduate and get out of there. But when I did, I took 6 pages and I sewed them together and I sent them around to different houses in Europe to try to get a job, really. And then a friend invited me to Milan to sleep on his couch, and I got a job at Moschino there within 2 weeks because the creative director there really responded to these half-drawn, half-collaged images that I'd created. And I think she even went to bat for me, because I don't think everyone within the House of Moschino responded to them, but she went to bat for me. She felt very strongly about them. They really communicated with her. And about 2 to 3 months after that, a letter was forwarded to me from my London apartment from Dries van Noten, which was probably my favorite designer then and still my favorite designer. And he also responded to the collaged work. And so this rescue mission from Central St. Martin's was really helping me out. And we spoke, and he flew me over to Antwerp, and I felt good about the meeting because I felt like I was legit now, because someone was paying me to be the designer. And if I was employed by this designer, couldn't I also be employed by this designer? I had that naivety of youth where you tend to load all of a certain market into the one, you boot them all together, and I didn't have the subtleties to understand the differences between the brands. So just because they shared a factory doesn't mean they share an aesthetic, you know? And so I arrived at Dries van Noten, and my portfolio was full of my Moschino work, because I didn't value the previous work that had got me the jobs. I now thought, working for a company that pays you, well, that's real work. They'll appreciate that. And it was a very, very, it was a very nice man, and the interview became very, very quiet. And at the end, all he really said was, I was hoping to see more of what you'd sent me. And he wasn't interested in Moschino drawings, Moschino illustrations. And so that taught me an awful lot very early about the power of this illustration. It's a bit like, and I honestly do feel at times it's like a superpower that I didn't know how to manage for a long time. And sometimes I got to grips with it, and sometimes it was completely out of my control. And then you asked about Armani. When I went from Moschino to Armani, I had one of those massive shifts again, because these are two designers that are so far removed from each other. They don't have anything in common other than that they're based in Milan. And so I found myself having to really go through some mental acrobatics to communicate successfully. And sometimes I would put things together for Mr. Armani, and they were completely rejected. And I think I began to understand that what this is like, if you come in with an aesthetic that belongs to some other house, or belongs too much to yourself and not enough to the company that you're illustrating for, you are a threat. Because usually these companies or these big names have spent their entire lives building something. They've poured all their finances into it. They've sacrificed their families and the lives outside their work. That's all there is. And you come in and you don't belong. And you can feel like you don't belong very quickly, I think, if you are not illustrating in a style that really speaks to the designer. There have been illustrators that worked within the companies that I've worked for, that their design is pretty, there isn't a lot of design there, but it could send the designers, the head designers, into raptures because of how they've rendered it, because of how they've captured a line, they've captured the imagination of the creative. So I think for me, the fact that it's a tool and it's a communication has been something that I have had to work with for a long time. And sometimes I've communicated badly. Sometimes I haven't understood that the language changes, that vocabulary changes. And so if you were looking to enter a company like some of the ones I worked for, I almost would go so far as to say you could be a mediocre designer with a brilliant illustrative hand and get the job over an exciting designer. Mm-hmm. I don't know, that sounds a little controversial, but I do feel the power of illustration is such.
I spoke to Massimo Nicosia, and he told me that they're now using graphic novel illustrators to do lots of the illustration for fashion houses, because they felt like they could capture proportion and they weren't fluffy, as the words he used to me. is he felt that illustrators were not communicating anything apart from creating nice imagery that had no function. So I guess to all the illustrators who are watching tonight and listening, is there is a role, like Audrey and Massimo and myself have played, and Jackie, and Barbara leading the ship as well, is kind of trying to have a vision or imagine the vision of the designer. It's really difficult because I worked for Dior and they loved what I did. And then I worked for someone else in Dior and they just said, pay him off, not good enough. And I've had two experiences with the same designer, design house, and it was a horrible experience. And I just couldn't work out. And even when I tried to salvage it, it seemed to get worse. So I realized if they don't like what you do, it just doesn't work. And then like, we're not going to waste your time. Thank you very much. Bye. Because you're not in sync with our vision. And I guess for someone like Barbara, if I was to come in and illustrate for you and you're an illustrator, you're probably the hardest person to work for because you have a handwriting and I have to kind of reimagine that handwriting or do something totally different. You know, Disney said that he would never get people that could draw Mickey Mouse well because they had nothing to offer. So I guess my question to you, Barbara, is if you were to commission an illustrator to come and design a collection for you, how would you, like, what would you do? What would be your sort of way of going about it?
I would say, why pay all this money when I can do it myself in 2 minutes? And it's in my head. Sorry.
So I guess you would be the
excuse me, there are many not many, I don't know, but there are designers out there that don't draw. I mean, they draw. So those are the designers that would be more apt to, you know, hire illustrators to come in and illustrate their collections, or you know, just and then in the process of doing that, they may discover things about that talent that the illustrator has that might flow over into the design area and inspire them in design work, you know, and then they develop that, but they never really let you into the design because they're the designer. So it's a back and forth motion. They might take something from you. You don't realize it at the time. And then as you're working, you realize that, hey, that went down the runway. That was something I put out there. And then you're kind of like, wow, that was great, you know? So I don't know if there's any one particular way of getting into fashion illustration and making a success of it. I think a lot of it is luck, you know, a lot of it is intuition. To address what you said, Patrick, about the person who, you know, one person loved your work and was able to be inspired by it, that has nothing to do with really your work. That has to do with the person who's looking at it and may not have the imagination to bring it to where it goes, you know? So I wouldn't take that personally. It probably means that that person is not the person for you or even the company at the end of the day. You know, you don't know how long he's going to last.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't know how long he's going to last, and he's nervous about what he's putting out there. So he's not going to gamble on you unless he has a relationship. And now we get into relationships, how to establish them. And it goes back to trust and longevity. And it's just like what we're building here, you know, a panel of people that, you know, can actually make a contribution to what you're trying to do, as opposed to, you know, just being on the air to promote themselves, you know, which not this particular thing, but that happens a lot, you know.
But I think both of you are looking in the wrong direction of going to illustrating designers' work. I think it should be into advertising and promotion. That's where the illustration has got value. What?
Going back to old school.
Yeah, of actually, because photography is so expensive, the model costs, the you know, the photographer, the stylist, and you could get it all together if you know how to draw, and both of you are fabulous at drawing, I can see. You're putting out the image. You don't need all those other people who can't really do it.
I don't disagree with you. I wasn't saying that fashion illustration with designers are the only way to go. We were just talking about that particular avenue. It wasn't that I don't think that fashion illustrators can go down many paths, you know. It's just that, as you know, photography is dominant. People are afraid of change. They don't want to risk their reputations. You know, it's branding. It's like, are we going to brand with an illustrator? Or are we going to brand with a photographer? They're afraid to change.
I don't agree with you. I think there's an opening now with this new, believe me, there's opening for illustration now in the other direction. And I've been through beginnings of things and how you find a new direction.
Yeah.
I think the only negative with well, not a negative, but the biggest problem that there's been with photography over illustration is obviously realism. So where you've got, if I'm using a celebrity to promote a brand, how do you, the illustration's just an illustration of what they think it is, where if I use someone like Harry Styles to promote Gucci, it is Harry Styles in the picture and they're using his influence. And that's why commercial photography using influential people is so powerful for photography, where an illustration of Harry Styles is, well, that's just a painting of him. He wasn't really there. And that's kind of the mindset of this new market of kind of, oh, well, I need to aspire. You know, you were talking earlier about Hepworth and how influential she was over earrings, and everybody wanted that image. And I think that that's the toughest part of illustration. But with regards to, I guess, illustrators working alongside fashion designers, there is a real demand there. And I know in advertising, illustration is growing. And we've seen that. We've seen Gucci using more illustration. We've seen more brands getting braver. We did sort of a project with Alberto Ferretti, trying to sort of influence brands how that and educate. I think brands need a little bit more education in what illustrators can do rather than be commissioned. So we're trying to do these sort of projects alongside brands and trying to ignite a new spark of imagination, because art directors, where they're used to photographers, aren't brave. Then, you know, and that's what Audrey's saying as well, is the bravery of going away from photography is a massive shift. And I know commercial illustration, we're seeing it with Cecilia Karlstad, we're seeing all these illustrators starting to draw, but they're drawing sort of lower line, where, you know, the Pradas, the Gucci's, using high end and replacing photography. That's going to be a big move. And I don't know if Jackie would have a clue, because she writes quite a lot about photography and drawing and this field. But in the sort of journalistic world, is there much of a discussion about these two fields, or there isn't a debate? Or
I feel honestly that it hasn't reached the levels where big like Business of Fashion or Vogue are really writing about it. I feel that it is something that's happening, but it's still, from what I can see, it's still on the fringes. That's why I think it's amazing, and I'm really happy to support what you do, because I think the value in it is enormous. But I don't think I've ever seen an article on the Business of Fashion, which seems to be the big giant when it comes to reporting on fashion trends. I also think So the journalistic aspect, I don't see it. And then when as an instructor that's teaching the new students that are coming up through, I see an over dependence on the computer, just relying so much on the glossiness that the computer creates, that I feel like even if someone has beautiful illustration style, they get seduced whenever they start to plug it into the computer and they lose something. So I feel like on both sides, I feel like we're championing something right in the middle, but it just needs to grow beyond us.
I've got a question for Typoe. Typoe,
Hello.
Being an artist, where you have a particular way of working, how has it been? Because I know you've done some fashion projects. So how has it been coming into the other side? Did you find that fashion, were you seduced, like Jackie said, by the fashion industry, or did you find that it hindered your creativity?
It's just different because I'm very much like a collaborative person by nature. So like I've done I was the creative director for Skrillex for a little while. I've done stuff with Rag & Bone. I've done stuff with Adidas. I think for me, I really just like to have conversations with the masses and work with different people and people that I respect. And it was fun because it was just different. Like I'm used to museums and galleries and like public art, like steel sculptures and murals and stuff like that. So for me, it's more interesting and it's fun because I'm outside of that world. So when I get brought in, it's like the new guy to the party. Everyone's like, oh, Typoe's here. All right, cool. Like, let's have fun and let's make this thing. And it's like where I'm not like, I'm coming at it from a completely different angle where I'm kind of just accepted. And they're like, oh, cool. Let's like, give us your designs, whatever you want. And I'm just like, cool, this is great. And it like works out. But for me, the only way to get there is like, first I need to have like what are my goals? And then I have to put myself around the people that I want to work with. Like it doesn't really happen by accident. And people don't just like run up on you, at the cafe. It's like, I'm very strategic in terms of where I travel, where I go, who I'm hanging out with. A lot of my friends are designers and musicians and different things. And I just like that creative energy around me. So for me, I think whether I end up working with someone or not, it's just imperative to put myself where I want to be and act as if like we're all contemporary, And then I think the rest usually just works itself out.
I worked with Genesis, the great Genesis is a collected artist, a fine artist. He does, have you heard of him?
I'm not sure. There's a few, I'm not sure which, it just heard.
Anyway, he's sort of like, he was a poet, and then he started to put his poetry to the canvas, and he came up with this style that's being collected worldwide now. And he actually came to me because he loved my fashion illustrations and he wanted to collaborate. So we actually did about 4 or 5 paintings together. It was really fun. It was really like exploring a new universe. And we actually sold the paintings. We sold all of them for over like $40,000 a painting, which was great. And it opened up another world, so you can't really, I try not to pigeonhole myself as a fashion illustrator per se. I mean, I do behind the scenes paintings like you see in the back here. I try to use all of my styles on, I use it on the iPad Procreate, I use it on canvas, I use it by hand. And then I look outside myself to see where does it belong in the world. And that's kind of,
I love that.
Yeah, it's like you really have to keep exploring. I mean, I'm much older than you guys, and I haven't given up on the possibilities of new adventures with my art. And it's not necessarily with designers, it could be, which I'm working with a young rap artist now doing some of his costumes. Not really costumes, he wanted like saleable costumes, like couture costume. So we kind of collaborated on this whole new field of design, trying to put something new out there for him. And assisting an assistant to that, to facilitate that, was exciting for me. I liked working with the young people, thinking new ways. At first I thought, oh, this is not really maybe what I want to do, but you know what? It was presented to me and I'm going to see where it goes. And it's a lot of fun. So I don't think anything is one particular thing. I think if you start closing yourself off to looking through one vision, then you may not notice the other visions that may be coming to you, you know, and other avenues, such as Fida and the talk. And I love what you're doing for fashion illustration. I think it's brilliant. It really sparked my first love, you know, which is fashion illustration. But I think I think fashion illustration it's doing better, but it's not where I'd love it to be, like before photography took over. I mean, I was super busy making tons of money, and then it evaporated, and you had to find new ways of using your talents, you know. So you go into design, or you work with a designer, which was great, you know. I found out all kinds of avenues that way. But it doesn't end. You're in a constant search for where do you belong, you know? So I don't want to occupy the whole.
No, but I think what's quite nice there, and well done, Massimo, because we wanted to bring Typoe into the debate, was how fashion illustration, and my concept is to think how to widen the sort of vision of what fashion illustrators, fashion artists, fashion creatives can be. And, you know, with someone like Typoe, who's a multidisciplinary artist and sort of being experiential and creative, and I've been working in VR and I've been experimenting with all things. It doesn't mean that I'm now a VR artist. It's just I'm being playful and I'm trying to be creative and think differently. And I think that's what I guess we are. We're sort of fashion creatives, we're image makers. And I guess doing the exhibition, we just done this exhibition in Miami, and I know, you know, someone like Typoe, you've just opened a gallery. How's the scene from the gallery perspective, also with lockdown and, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say off of what you were talking about with just thinking outside the box, like, I think it's much more interesting if somebody from outside, like, just because everyone's in their world, right? It's like the fashion designers are doing fashion design, the galleries and the artists are doing the gallery and the museum thing. And it's much more interesting when somebody from another world approaches something else, like when they're approaching a museum. Like if you were a fashion designer, like you would probably have a whole different take on what you would do with a space than I would, because I have this built-in sort of knowledge of how the gallery system works, how people are buying work, like what sells, what doesn't, like what's the market, who's my audience, all these things, where you would come in and be like, oh my God, I could have these things flowing over here and do all this stuff, and it would be a different conversation. And I think like breaking out of those boundaries makes it more interesting. And it also, like everybody's been saying, it gives all of us more avenues just to make money and be creative with different people.
Yeah.
I do think what you're doing is amazing, because you're bringing back the memory of this art form, which it is an art form, that people have forgotten about. And I think painting, sort of the regular painting is getting so boring, excuse me. That's why they're using incredible old Black people's work and so on to make a little bit of interest. But I think what you're doing is fantastic. You've just got to keep on it, saying this is fantastic, this is great, and not just the computer fashion illustration, which is a different set of problems, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exploring.
Yeah, I mean, this is back to the pencil. Get them using a pencil again.
Well, the debate on drawing could last 5 years, because I guess the fundamentals of college and schools and not doing life drawing, and the lack of studios, that sort of debate, that's a 3-hour debate with regards to drawing. And I know when me and Massimo worked together as lecturers, and we both taught drawing, and the resistance we had and the fights and how we tried to push people to understand about line and weight, and also in the UK we used to have foundation courses so people would learn the fundamentals of drawing. That's gone. So it's kind of a everything speeded up to 2 years, quick, get in, get through, get out, and there's no sort of basic training. So you're kind of losing that sort of joyous moment of learning how to kind of be playful and drawing and using sticks and long paintbrushes and sticking a stick on your head and drawing and finding your mark. You know, think of someone like Tracy Emin, who draws on backs of paper and has a sort of etching, very crude, naive mark, but it's her visual language. And I think that's the part of experimenting as an artist and as a creative. And I think bringing it into the context of working with a designer is you just showing them all the capabilities and sort of shape-shifting. I think an illustrator is a shapeshifter. They have the ability to jump around and show lots of dynamic approaches. And you know what Jackie was saying earlier about her introducing collage just as a sort of last moment. I think, you know, we all go through these moments. And I guess, Jackie, how are you still bringing back to collage? Because I've seen some of your drawings recently. How's the collage world?
Well, I think probably like a lot of people during pandemic, I managed to wrench my fashion illustration skills from the clutches of my former design career. I reclaimed it, I think, and because I wasn't restricted by any, you know, brand that I was particularly working for or anything, I find great joy in it now. And like I come on to Fida's Fida's Instagram every day, and I just marvel at some of the things that all the artists are doing. And I think like more and more, I want to make sure, like I don't think there's a negativity about the fact that fashion illustration isn't where it should be, because I think so many people are starting to know about it through what you're doing and, you know, and other ways. And the fact that there is an exhibition in Miami, like who'd have thought it, you know, or, and just the more, I think, the more people, this idea of collaboration, what Typoe was saying about not necessarily being a fashion person, inserting yourself in a fashion situation and not feeling intimidated. I think for a long time, we were all siloed. If I was a designer, I wasn't a fashion illustrator. Now I claim the fact that, yes, I'm a fashion illustrator. You know, if you worked in fine art, you wouldn't be caught dead collaborating with a fashion designer. I think that is falling by the wayside. And so that's a good sign for the future. And I think that students that are coming up and young people have no time for these labels. So yeah, there's no reason why as a fashion designer, you wouldn't be hired to illustrate a book on classic literature, you know? It just depends on what you're putting out there, your style, and how it communicates. So, and yes, once in a while, I do still collage.
And so what I'm going to quickly do before we've been 1 hour and that flew, but I'm just trying to look if anyone put anything in the chat. A lot of like admiration. If anyone had any questions, you can stick it in the chat. But I guess the exhibition, Massimo, so we did a few months ago, me and Massimo spoke about how to have an exhibition. Is it possible during COVID, because no exhibitions were happening, and having something live and tangible, you know, like Audrey's saying, this sort of emotive experience of people being able to be there. I can't be there because I'd have to quarantine for about 5 years. So God knows what's going to happen with the UK. But just with regards to this long distance happening and having friendships in different spaces enabled this show to happen. And, you know, me and Massimo's God father to my son. So we've got a good relationship. But I guess enabling this to happen was a sort of a miracle, I think. I don't know. It felt quite seamless a bit.
It felt seamless. I think also because you and I have always shared a particular appreciation. I remember always going, whenever I went to Patrick's house, I'd always look at his sketchbook from when he was at uni. I always thought his sketches and his rough drafts were better than his final illustrations because there was this naturalness to it. You know, it wasn't like so precise and finished. And I love that there were some mistakes and you crossed things out, whatever. So, but yeah, no, I think it was, we actually, surprisingly, we had a great, Barbara was here at the opening. We had a great turnout considering we had a hurricane warning. Miami was flooded. We were in a pandemic. So I think Fida actually brought people out. And I think what was successful about it is, like Jackie said, who would have thought that Miami would host an exhibition on fashion illustration? It's not something that typically happens in Miami, you know. And I think someone actually asked, what is the future, how I see the future of illustration? I really hope it becomes more prominent. I had a bit of hope, a glimmer of hope in January 2020 when Vogue actually did one whole issue without using photographers, but they did it actually for a sustainable reason. And all the photo shoots and everything inside was actually illustrated. And I thought that was very innovative and was really great. And I think it helped sort of bring fashion illustration or illustration to the forefront. Jackie, you know what? I teach my kids here to use collage. I think it's the best way to you know, stick stuff on and draw on top of it. What we do is we actually teach drawing, so old school arts, still life, and then they do fashion drawing 1, so they learn both things. And then we go towards, once they've mastered how to actually do the 9 heads and all that stuff, we teach Procreate and digital illustration. So what we want them to do is actually draw by hand first, then scan the stuff in, you know, and work on that. So we always want, I want there to be this human connection to the illustration and not just something done by hand. Mm-hmm. And it's funny you talk about the graphic novels Valentino did for the Super V bag. He actually teamed up with 3 Japanese manga artists. So again, going to this graphic world, you know, there is a connection. I think it's going down to narrative. Maybe people want more of a story and then it gets expressed through different illustration styles. Maybe different illustrators communicate to different type of audience, you know, so. But I really do think that illustration is becoming more important.
I think it's going to be.
What was interesting, what one of the suggestions Barbara said when she came to the exhibition is she loved everything, but, and I mentioned this to you, Pat, maybe Barbara was saying, you know, to sort of open it up, where you have a section which is like digital illustration, a section which is like, you know, like maybe old school media and new media. So we can see the two worlds colliding together.
Yeah.
And that maybe might open up to more different types of illustrators as well.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like within the context of that fashion illustration exhibition, maybe we could coordinate fine arts fashion illustration, whereby you're actually painting using the aesthetic of fashion illustration. So it becomes, because you get much more money. I'm a little money oriented, much more
value,
use fine arts, use the vehicle of fine arts to try to coordinate with your fashion illustration so that you can get more money for the result. When somebody's going to pay a lot more money, I mean, I have a painting back here called Behind the Scenes, and it was a scene from Ralph Lauren when I worked there. And people will pay a lot more money for canvas than they will for paper. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot, it's a vehicle that I think maybe we haven't really explored enough as fashion illustrators. We are artists, you know, and fashion is very, people love fashion. So maybe there's a way of coordinating what you do as a fashion illustrator on paper to now go into the fine arts area. And I point to you, Patrick, because a lot of your work, when I look at it, I think of the old masters, like fine artists who, you know, drew the way you drew, but I don't see your, like I see it as a painting. I'm thinking, oh, this guy could be a really fine artist. It's beautiful, you know. So that's and Massimo was talking to that. It's like another area that he was talking about that he teaches, but maybe that's an additional area, and it becomes maybe just another course.
You know, I remember Patrick was doing these illustrations, and what he would do to get the skin tone, he would scan parts of his hand. Do you remember that, Pat? Yeah. I think it was it the David Hockney portraits you did, and he would scan his hand in and then like use that for the skin tone. So again, this like multidisciplinary way of doing things. Yeah. Speaking of money, you brought up a good point, Audrey. I forgot to mention that the reason we also created this exhibition is obviously to sell the paintings and for all the illustrators and artists to make money, but a percentage of what gets sold is actually going towards a scholarship for a student to be able to come and study here in Miami. So, you know, it's helping, supporting future illustrators, future artists. So, you know, if you could help spread the word, you know, and
I'm doing the same. I'm actually doing the same thing with a Halston scholarship. We're looking for different schools to set up this Halston scholarship, which I'm doing with his niece.
Maybe we can connect afterwards if you want.
Yeah, I think that would be great because we're going around to all the colleges. She's bringing her exhibition of the Halston. She has his archives, and this is his niece, Leslie. And we're trying to build, even develop a line of products, you know, to go along with the exhibition, where whoever comes to the exhibition can buy the products. So, you know, it's just generating more interest, and it's also an avenue to make money. You know?
That's the magic word, make money.
That's my middle name, make money.
but I think too many illustrators are frightened of money, and I think it's so important that you have value. And you know, we were talking to Typoe earlier, and he was saying, you know, being asked to work for free and how to get over that bridge of not working for free, and it's not always promotion, and having the courage to say, well, that needs to have a cost. There has to be, you know, I have to eat, I have to travel, I have to buy pencils. You know, it doesn't, we're not using bits of chalk out of the floor or going into the woods to find bits. We might do if we want, but I know, I guess with Typoe saying is becoming this industrial person or becoming more commercial, I think is so important. So with what Audrey's saying about this money, don't be frightened. And I know it's a grey zone for illustrators and being paid and undervaluing themselves quite heavily. And it will be a big shift. That's going to be the shift, is having this, and people will appreciate you more once you charge more. You'd be surprised.
Well, I also think, Patrick, that if you show, it's like with anything, you have to bring something to that person for that person to want you, and they have to bring something to you for you to want them. So if they're offering you money, you're going to illustrate for them. If you're offering them something in your illustration that's going to make them money, you need to know that. You need to know that so that you can negotiate a price for your work and not work for nothing. You can't give it away. You know, you have to value it and know where the value lies for the person you're negotiating with.
Yeah.
Typoe, like you with the gallery, I know besides your own work, but like when new artists approach you, how do you teach them maybe how much to sell their artwork for?
Well, it's in the art world, it's very specific depending on like the provenance of your work, who owns your work, what museums you're showing in, you know, what different galleries represent you. Like I learned a lot through public art, through also working with like the different fashion houses and stuff like that. My first question because I get approached by all sorts of like swim brands and influencers and people that want to like design bracelets with me and all sorts of like wacky stuff that I like could not care about less. And I let them do their quick pitch. And then the most important question I ask first is, what is your budget? Because like at this point, like I'm 37 years old, I own a house. I can't be having 40 meetings a day with people that have no money and they want me to work for free. And I think people look at anybody that's doing illustration or painting or anything, and they're like, oh, well, it's fun. You like to do it. But I'm like, you know, did the interior designer of this new building work for free? Like, did the construction guy work for free for promotion? Like, is the chef in the restaurant working for free? Like, none of these people are. This is my job. And like, I just don't have time to waste on stuff like that.
I think there's a misconception where something creative is sort of frivolous. And I mean frivolous in the sense, like you said, oh, it's fun. So, you know,
yeah,
whether you play it or not, you enjoy doing it. But
yeah, I've had clients, literally, I had this one guy who owned a chain of like restaurants around the whole country. He was a multimillionaire. And he was like, oh, well, just bring your friends and have fun and you'll just do it and it'll be cool.
on that note.
Excuse me, isn't there time to train up some agents for this section of art? Make it serious.
Yeah, the agent world is a very tough zone because agents will take 40 to 50%, and are the agents doing their job well enough? And I think we're going to have a talk with agents. So one of the talks coming up are talking to agents, commercial illustration agents. So that's one to come. But I think the role of agents and how they navigate illustrators' journeys is another big debate. Drawing and agents is another 1 hour discussion. So
can I say one thing really quick?
Go on, Typoe.
I want to, this is one thing. So I've owned a gallery with my partners for going on 11 years now. We built our own gallery in Miami. And one thing that I tell every single artist is that you're doing two things. It's artwork. You have the art and you have the work. And you are the CEO of your own company and nobody's going to give you anything. Like, you have to go like you're running Coca-Cola and you are Coca-Cola, and you have to go out there and get it. Like, what's my goal? What am I trying to get? Where am I trying to get to? And then you have to go after it, and you have to like treat yourself with respect. Because if you don't think of it like that, and it's all fun and creative, then you're going to get taken advantage of every time. And
that's called selling. That's called selling.
Yeah.
The master arts of selling and selling yourself well. And as Audrey says, it's all about the money, which is great. So everybody, well, it's people's personal time now. So thanks for the talk, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks,
been a
guys.
pleasure. Have a good night. Enjoy your dinners or your lunch, and we'll speak soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bye. Thank you, Jackie.
Nice to
Bye-bye.
meet everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.